Hello folks, today we build a CRUD application using React. Previously we implemented backend using Spring Boot and Micronaut, and in this video we cover front-end part using ReactJS. Let me show you our backend just to recall you. I'm using Spring backend, but we can use Micronaut backend as well because they are similar. They have similar functionality. So, as you remember, we implemented CRUD application for our car. We can find all cars, create car, delete car, and find car by ID. And today we implement front-end functionality for our backend. First of all, we need to create empty ReactJS application. There are a lot of ways to create this ReactJS, but I'm using terminal and npx command. On my computer, I created a React projects folder, and I call command npx create react, and I give name for my React project, for example CRUD React app. For using npx, you need to install it first. It's very straightforward and easy. You just navigate to the browser and say like npx install, and you can use any of the first websites, and it will guide you how to install npx. You can also use npm, for example. npm and npx, it's some kind of like Maven for Java developers like Gradle. It's just a tools to build a structure of the project and to make the dependencies easier to manage. So let me just click enter. So I use command npx create react app, and I give the name for my React app as CRUD React app. Let me click enter, and I will let do npx its job. Just this command will take all the inside commands and will create empty React.js project for me. It takes some time, so it can take like a minute or maybe more. It depends on your internet connection and your computer speed. Okay, as you can see, project was successfully created. If you see this happy hacking message, it means that project was done. Let me show you. For example, if I move ls, I can see my CRUD React app application in this project. So today I'm gonna code in using Visual Studio. Visual Studio is really convenient tool for front-end parts, and it's free. So let me open it with Visual Studio, find my project, React projects, and CRUD React app. Click open, and as you can see, I successfully opened my React project. And this is structure for our React. We have src folder, we have app, it's the app.js, it's the entry point for our application. We have index CSS, index.js. For those of you who are new to React, React just a bunch of components which are component is on top of other components. So React just is components compound, and you can deal with components like the smallest item of your web project. And let me start this React application just to show you how it works. Okay, let me start my React application. For this purpose, I need a terminal. You can open terminal from this pad, and you see this tab terminal. and you can write the command like npm start, and after you entered npm start, React should launch, and it should open a browser. By default localhost 3000, it's default port for React. Let me get back to Visual Studio. And you don't need to stop application. You can just create some changes, save them, and React will automatically reload the changes in the browser. Let me check the problems. No problems for now. And if I navigate to the app.js, I can, for example, remove all this stuff from this div and put my custom div, for example, hello world h1. I hit save, Command S or Control S if you are on Windows. And if I go to the Chrome, as you can see, I see hello world, my message. So let's get back to our project, and let's try to write our template frontend for our cars. As you remember, we have find all, which receives all cars from our backend. Let's display these cars like a table on our front end. Let's get to VS Code and create our component. First component is a car. I create car.js. If you want to make a component, you need to name your JS file with uppercase. It's like a convention for ReactJS developers. So if I want to create component, I just create function and call it car. And actually, I can just return whatever I want. Just return simple HTML, whichever I want to return. And this component will be displayed as HTML. For example, let's try to return hi h2, hi there, for example. And if I want to use this car component outside this component, I just type export default car, and I can use instead of this custom h1, I can use my component inside this app component. So if I hit reload and I can check, oh, car is not defined. Let me get back to this and import my car. Import car from car. Don't forget to import. It's similar to Java. You need to import your component from, if you have components in different files. So let me check. Export default, import this car, but was not found in car module. Let me check. I just need to save this car component because it can't see my file because it wasn't saved. So let me just check the browser. As you can see, hi there. So I need some table. I'm not really good at HTML, so we can copy paste the HTML table from somewhere. Let me just Google it. I really like this table. Let me copy paste the code for it. Here's our table. And I'm gonna paste it to my car component instead of this one. And here it is. So here's our table. We need to leave this company. Instead of company, we use brand, model, and year. And we don't need these placeholders anymore. And we're gonna get our cars from the server and fill this table rows. Let me get back to the files and create new file. I just call it like constant. It's the file where I'm gonna store constants for my application if I want to use them globally. And first constant is several URL. And to be able to use it everywhere, I need to use export default. And my server URL we can copy paste from the Postman. And let's get back to the car. And we gonna write some code to fetch data from car. Let me write this code. I create const get cars, and this is a sync function to get cars from the server. And this sync function is will be responsible for getting cars from my server using fetch. And let me just create const response equals await. Fetch is a standard function from JS to fetch data from the server. Inside the fetch, you need to put a URL where to fetch the data. So I'm gonna use server URL and plus car, because in server URL I have only localhost 8080, so I need to add /car to be able to call this find all cars. And let me import my server URL. And we have imported our server URL from our constant. And in case we deploy, for example, our application to some server, or we will run our application in some container or something like that, we can easily change backend by just changing this URL in one file, and changes will be applied in every files. It's really good to have such constants in one file, just to be able to change them only once, and they will change in every file they use. So I need change to fetch car. I don't need to pass any other params, and then when I catched, I just use response as response JSON. It's my response JSON, which comes from server as JSON object. And what can I do? I can use state. State in React is some kind of hooks which can be used. It's internal React functions which allows us to set some variables in the state and then update the state, and all when we trigger update state, component will be reloaded, but only component, not the full page. Let me create this state. So I just create constant and I create constant for cars and setter. It's similar to setter in Java. Set cars, and I'm gonna use state. And don't forget to import use state from React. And when I called useState, as you can see, it's state from the React, I can put my cars response inside the cars. It can be any object, and of course it can be list or map. And setCars is the naming for my function to update state of cars. So I can just use setCars. Once I received cars from my server, I can put response to the cars, and this setCars will automatically add my response to the cars state. And what else can we do? We can use effect. It's another function from React just to trigger this getCars function to fetch cars from the server when we first load these components. So I can call use effect. And use effect. And of course it doesn't see it for now because I haven't imported. You need to import a use effect. Something like that. And let's add comma. I want to import use effect from React. And when I imported this function, I can just put my code for getCars and invoke this code inside this function. And I put like, in case it won't get cars, it's just empty array. And that's actually it for getting cars. Right now we need to loop through the cars and apply our cars to this table. So how can we apply JavaScript code in this HTML? We can use this syntaxes as brackets, and we can use cars. If cars are present, we can cars map. It's the same as map in Java, or for loop if you want to call it like that. And we can just map through the cars. So I say car, and we loop through the cars. And we just multiply this table. As much cars as we have, we're gonna have these rows. If, for example, we have 2 cars, we will have 2 rows. If 10, we will have 10 rows. And we can, instead of, for our car brand, we're gonna use car brand. It should be the same. Car should be the same as this naming in the map, and brand, it's the naming of our JSON field. It's pretty similar if you have worked with GSP. It's somehow similar when you implemented for each for GSP, but of course it's more modern way to get data from the server and loop through it. So for the model, we're gonna use car model, and here is car year. And we can save. And another thing we need to add, we want to add a key. It's a React internal field just to allow React to manage this cars object because, for example, if some data in table will change, React will know by this key which exactly row will to reload. So we need to specify key, and we can put any unique field for this key. Luckily, we have this ID field. It's unique for every car. So let me just add car ID, and I guess we are done. Let's try to check in browser, and as we can see, we have an error. Use effect is not a function, and let me save my file and check why it's not a function. I guess I found the issue. As you can see, I just misspelled. I used user instead of use effect. I guess that was the issue. Let's try. Use effect is not defined. Yeah, now we have another exception. Let me check if, yeah, this one is also should be use effect, not user effect. And let's save. And as we can see, we have our table, but we have no data. Let's check in the console. What else do we see? Let's restart. And we can see unexpected token is not a valid JSON. So I assume we received some different response from the backend. Let me check the network. And as you can see, here is our car. Undefined car, a localhost 3000, undefined car. That's strange. It should be HTTP localhost. Let me check. And instead of this default, we need export const, because we export constant. Let's hit send, and as you can see, we have failed error because I guess because that's of the course origin. We tried to request our server from different IP, and our server is unhappy about that. What can we do? We can just mark our controller as cross origin to allow any request from any IP to call our controller, and this should help. Let's get back. Let's restart the page, and as you can see now, no errors, but still no data, and we should have some data. Let me check network and the car. As you can see, we request car and receive response, and in the response we see our cars. So everything is fine now. We should be able to display our cars. Let's get back to our VS Code and check why it's not showing our cars. So we get response, we fetch response and set cars in the response. Okay, let's check where we could make a mistake. I guess we made a mistake in this loop. Instead of this curly braces, I need round one, and let me change it because it's a map, and map has this structure. I just get incorrect brackets. Let me check in browser. So we get cars from the server, and we set cars in our state. We loop through the cars, and we show cars in the table. Let me align the code and save it. Now let me get back to the browser, and as you can see, here's our data on front end. We need to apply styles to see this table prettier. Let me copy paste these styles and put it to the style CSS. We can put it in custom styles, for example, or we can put in as global in app CSS. Let me save. And as you can see, here's our table. So what can we do? We can add buttons to edit or to delete car, but firstly I want to add some form to create a new car. And let me create a new file and let me call it car form. It's just a form for our car creation. Inside our car form, I create an HTML form which will be responsible for input car details and submit. So it's simple HTML form with input like name as brand, and let's add some placeholder. Enter car brand, and let me copy this input and create another one as model, and another one is year, and we need a button to submit our form. Button with type submit, and we need a function which will handle submit. And we say if on submit this form, we're gonna trigger handle submit. When we click this submit button, our handle submit will be triggered. And inside this submit form, we need to, first of all, prevent form from default behavior, because we don't want to reload the page once we trigger submit. And let's check if it works. Let's, you know what, let me add some alert with some dummy message and try to add our car form on the page. So what? How can we do this? We can use our car component, and we can, for example, say that inside our car component, we want to add our car form. And React is uses JSX. JSX is kind of strict about HTML, and it should be HTML should have a correct structure, and you can't put two elements in one with another as a root. Root element should be only one. So if you want to, you need to create some like dummy root element like this, and then you can put a couple of elements together. And one error. Let me import car form and save. And here we have our car form. If you click add car, as you can see, we don't prevent default. We have this form was submitted, so it means that we need to get back to the car form and maybe save it, for example. No, not like that. And let me check. Prevent default. Maybe I used incorrect. Let me copy paste from my previous project. Prevent default, something like that. Let me click. As you can see right now, it's not reloading our page and it's not submitting the form. And if we click our button, we see our triggered alert. So it means that our function works fine. We don't need this triggered anymore. And what all we need just to send our data to the server, so we can get our form data from the event. And our form data, we can transform it using new form data. So we get a event target as a form, and we say new form data, and we pass our form. Or we can use something like this just to prevent from creating a lot of variables. And we can transform our form data to JSON using object from entries and form data entries. Form data entries from entries will return us JSON. Let's check form JSON. If we open our browser console, we click, let me set some data in the fields and click add car. As you can see, we have our JSON and it's ready to be passed to the server. Let me get back to Visual Studio. And we again need to call fetch to send the request to the server, but this time it's gonna be post request and we need to send some data. So let me create request options. And method is post and headers. Headers are content type as JSON. And body is JSON stringify our form data. Form JSON. And it's our request options, and we need to use fetch, pass server URL, and don't forget to import it. Yeah, it's imported this time, plus car, and we need to pass request options, and then we receive response. We can wait for async response. And if we have response, we can process the response, or we can, if we have some data from server, but of course we don't have some data. As you can see, we only have, when we create car, we only have status, and that's it. So if we can check for status, for example, and if response OK, and if it's not OK, we can, for example, console log error happened, something like that, but of course it's better to process this error. And actually that's it. And once we saved car, it would be good to reload our car to fetch car data from the server. How can we handle it? We can use props to trigger car reload, car component reload, once we successfully saved our car to the server. Let me check. We can use like this. In the car, we can pass handle click as handle click. Handle click function, we're gonna create it. It's just a function. Let me create it. It's just a function, simply one, to get cars. And that's it. This function, if this function triggered, it will trigger get cars. Get cars will fetch our cars from the server and set cars in the state. And as I told previously, if state is triggered, it will reload this component. And we pass handle click as props in car form. So in car form, we need to get this handle click. So we gonna get props. In props, we can pass functions, we can pass some data, it doesn't matter. React can get any props you want. So in this handle click, we pass this handle click and we can trigger this handle click once the response is OK. And once it's fine, it will trigger handle click, which will be triggered in the cars. It will handle click will trigger get cars, and then our car will be fetched from this server. Okay, let's try to test. Let's get back to browser and let's create some car and click add car. And as you can see, everything is fine. If you check in Postman, for example, we successfully created a car. I guess it's pretty good one because it happened from the first time. So if I enter BMW, for example, some model 2022, add car, as you can see, we successfully saved the car. And what else do we need? We need edit and delete. Let's get back to our Visual Studio. Let's close others. And let's add delete component. And create another component. Delete component will be simple one. It's just a button to delete a car. So we're gonna return simple button and delete. And when we click on this button, on click, we trigger delete car function. And let's specify delete car. Delete car, I'm gonna fetch request with method delete to the server. And let's copy paste this fetch from car form. And we need method delete. We don't need a body. And we need to trigger car by ID. So we need to pass, somehow we need to pass ID. How can we do it? We can use props to pass car ID for this delete component. So I can put ID. And what else can I do? I need to add handle click, because I also need to refresh my table once I deleted the car. And let me use this delete component on car form. On car. After this car here, we're gonna have a data, table data with delete component. And as you remember, delete component is just a button. And let's check if we imported it. And we need to pass to this delete component our handle click and ID, because we need this ID to be passed to this delete component. So ID equals car get ID. And that's how we receive ID in our delete component. But this ID, we need to make some changes with it, because this ID comes as object, and we really need to make this as a field. So we're gonna use let ID object equals ID, and if we want to use this ID, we call ID object dot ID, and server URL is not defined. We need to import server URL from constant. And let's try to test. As you can see, we have our delete button. Click delete, and we successfully deleted car from our database. And if we want to add another car, we can add, and then we can delete. Pretty cool. And the last functionality is edit. Edit gonna be a little bit different. I want to use Modal. I need a React Modal for these purposes. So I use React Modal. In this documentation, you can use how we can install React Modal using npm. So let's get back to our Visual Studio. We need to stop our server using Ctrl+C or Command+C and put this command to install React Modal component. We need to wait until it's installed. As you can see now, everything's fine, and we can use React Modal. First of all, let's start our application once again. And let's get back and create edit component. And create edit component the same way as we did for delete and car and other components. And inside edit component, we're gonna use a modal for when we click on this edit, the modal form opens and we can edit some data in this modal. So first of all, we need to not waste our time with modal, we can use some example from this modal documentation. Let me copy paste. And let's get back to visual, return and paste our modal. And let's copy paste another code. This is just a function which are responsible for close modal, open modal, and other stuff. They are important for our model to work properly. And we need also copy paste styles. And we need to import our components. Just like that. And let's check how this modal works. First of all, we need to add this modal component in the car. And let me first of all export defaults. And then we just add it to the car just before delete button. Okay, and we have error. Subtitle is not defined. Subtitle is not defined. I guess we don't need this subtitle. And let me check this open modal. We don't need these buttons also, but we can always edit it afterwards. What else is not open? After open modal is not defined. I guess I don't need to remove this, or I haven't copy pasted all the, yeah, this one, subtitle. Let's check how it works. Here you can see we have open, but instead of open modal we can rename it like edit. If we click, as you can see, we have our model. It's not pretty, I mean, but we can always copy paste some styles to make it much prettier. So we need to add this our fields for car editing to this model. And let's get back to the VS, and instead of open model we need some other text like edit car. Here it is. Okay, and what else can we do? We can remove these buttons and leave only ones, and we need some fields, some more fields for our car. And let me create input. and name brand, and default value. We need some default value for this field, just to have some value when we edit. And we need car from the props. So let's use props to pass car. Where's our edit component? And of course we need handle click. Car and handle click, and default value is car brand. And of course we need to create model and year fields. So let me just copy paste and add like model and year. And we also need ID field, but we don't need it to be visible to the user, and that's fine. We can create non-visible field and we call it ID, because when we edit we need to pass ID, so our backend will know that we edit and not create the entity. Let's get back to our Visual Studio and car ID and make it hidden. And let's add button edit and type submit. And on submit this form, we're gonna handle submit or handle edit, whatever you call this function, whatever you name this function, it doesn't matter. And let me create function handle submit. We need event, and we can copy paste some details from our car form. First of all, we can copy paste. Let me copy paste everything, but with some changes. We need to prevent our form from default. We need to create JSON, and I guess that's pretty much it. And we need to close modal. Close modal after we successfully saved car. And let me import my server URL. And we need to pass car and handle click to the edit component. And let's do it. Car gonna be car, and handle click gonna be handle click. Just like that. Let me save and save edit component. Handle click is not defined in edit component. Yeah, that's because it's handler, but it should be handle. And let's check. So we have car, for example, this one, and let's click edit. As you can see, our form inputs are already filled with default data. That's because of this default value. So we can edit and, for example, change year to 23, hit edit, and as you can see, we have successfully updated our form, our car. And if we want, for example, change to something like that, we click edit and we updated our car. And that's actually all what I have for today. React is kind of you need to get used to it, to code on it. And of course, firstly, you will have a lot of errors, but it's pretty simple to code in React if you know some Java and if you can read documentation. I hope, guys, that you liked this video. Hit a like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I see you soon. Goodbye.